Fox News obtaining that FBI search warrant here. Let's continue our coverage right now and bring in a legal analyst to break it all down. A friend here of Fox News, Seth Berenzweig, breaking it all down for us as well. Seth, thanks again for joining us here on Live Now.
Always a pleasure.
All right, so let's get right into it. I mean, let's first talk about what a week it has been. I mean, this started on Monday with the unprecedented nature of this FBI raid. And I was thinking to myself, Seth, I was saying, okay, this is only Monday. What's going to happen on Friday? And now we know a little bit more about why they wanted to do this type of raid here. What are your thoughts just as this news is still coming down right now?
Well, you're right. It's been really not only an unusual week, it's been an unprecedented week. There are things that have happened on a virtual daily basis, which are really firsts that have really essentially never happened before. It really only started with the execution of a search warrant on the residence of a former president, but then it got hot from there. It was a very interesting move. I would consider it essentially a chess move by Merrick Garland. After all of the information, or as some might contend or argue, misinformation that was going around, which unfortunately culminated with a violent presence of a gunman who lost his life at the FBI field office in Cincinnati. Merrick Garland had pretty much had enough, and he called, of course, the press conference, which led to the next unprecedented event, which is a motion for the unsealing of the search warrant. But then what happened, which I think was also very interesting, was that the federal judge that afternoon issued an emergency order on the docket commanding the government to advise by 3 p.m. today whether or not the president would object or not object to the motion to unseal. This is relatively unheard of. Usually parties have at least a couple of days to try to address and brief an issue. The judge clearly is recognizing this as an all-out emergency. I have been checking on social media. There were indications on Truth Social from Trump that he was indicating he will likely not object. It appears leaning in that direction, and therefore there's probably not going to be an objection, and this is going to come out. And it's very unusual in all of these various aspects, but now we're going to have to digest what happened, what are the facts, what are in these 20 boxes, and how it applies under the law.
Yeah, absolutely. There with the Trump statement last night, it came down last night saying that he wants it released there. And so here we go. Just a day after, it was just hours after Merrick Garland put out that statement saying that they were working to unseal it. And now we are getting now that all happening there. So it's been a fast week, no doubt about it here for the former president here. Now, when we start learning a little bit more information about these related documents, some are classified, some are classified as super secret. And when we're talking about these classified information, the Trump and his attorneys are saying that they felt like these were declassified. How is this all going to come out in the wash at the end?
Well, I think there's a couple of problems with that contention. And of course, that's going to be one of his defenses. So you're absolutely right. That's something that they're going to raise. The problem with that is that if the lead Washington Post article and subsequent reporting is anywhere close to accurate, some of the information contained within the 20 boxes that were removed contain nuclear related information and high level nuclear related intercepts and exchanges of information. The president of the United States does not have the same legal authority, the same unfettered legal authority to declassify certain elements of information as it relates to nuclear related documents. So that's going to be a problem. To the extent that he's going to say that he had the right to declassify, can he demonstrate that he declassified? It's one thing to say that he had the right to do it, but can he demonstrate that he did it as to specific documents? If he didn't do it, but he intended to do it, he doesn't have the authority to do that wide open after he left the White House. So you've identified an issue that's indeed going to be key, but depending upon the timing, depending upon the contents of the documents, it's very less than clear about whether or not he's going to be able to do so. And the mishandling of highly classified information potentially can be a felony up to federal guidelines and under federal law.
The next question here that I think a lot of people are wondering too, when we're hearing about these super top secret information and files, why would Donald Trump want those, and why would he want to take it from the White House and put it in his estate there?
Well, I love the question, and that's the head scratcher that I think a lot of people are thinking about. I don't understand what the potential need would have been in that particular regard. Now, tipping our hat to the former president, he may be able to explain that. I can't imagine why anybody would need to take these things out of the White House. The prior status of his security clearance was revoked. It would be difficult to even imagine. At most, he might have a legitimate basis to print out and carry copies of sensitive nuclear documents while he was inside the White House, because if he needed them for a meeting, I can understand them being inside the White House. I have a very difficult time understanding why they need to be at his private residence in Florida. We know that there have been issues there with regard to security. There was at least one Chinese national that was arrested there not long ago on a suspicion of surveillance. You have people like Roger Stone and some of those folks that are walking around the premises. It really is a head scratcher. And I just have to tell you that I think that for some of the Republicans here in Washington that have been trying to step in front and trying to protect him, I think that really need to say to themselves, not so fast. We need to give the president all benefits of the doubt, and we need to give him an opportunity to provide a basis of why he did this. But I just have to tell you, sitting here today, I can't imagine why he felt that it was appropriate to take 20 crates of documents, at least some of which contain nuclear-related information. I don't know what in the world he was doing with that, and now we have greater clarity with regard to the purpose of the search that was conducted by the FBI.
All right, and Seth, I want to now bring in, Donald Trump has responded on his Truth Social, so I want to bring in part of his statement here. We're going to read it out, and then we'll talk about that. I'm reading this here for the first time as well. Here it is, Trump saying, number one, it was all declassified. Number two, they didn't need to seize anything. They could have had it anytime they wanted without playing politics and breaking into Mar-a-Lago. It was in secured storage with an additional lock put on as per their request there. So he is saying exactly what we thought there, saying that that it was all declassified. But let's talk about him saying that they could have done it in other ways to seize the assets.
Sure. Well, okay. So first of all, he can't declassify everything. But putting that aside, on that point, it's that's a little bit of a head scratcher. And here's why I say that. There were several instances over the course of a year plus where there were requests, there were visits. There was a subpoena from a grand jury. There was information, and there were requests to get the documents. And if the request, first of all, if he's saying that the request didn't occur, I think that's virtually impossible. And if the request did occur and he had an obligation under the Presidential Records Act to preserve and protect and to return those, then why did they walk out with 40 boxes? If he said all they had to do was ask, and we've pretty much given everything and it's not a big deal, why were they not produced pursuant to a subpoena? Why were they not produced pursuant to visits that happened as recently as almost 2 months ago between his lawyers and federal lawyers? Why were there 20 boxes that came out? So again, I don't want to get too far ahead of our skis and accuse President Trump of doing anything without getting a little bit more clarity. But I really question that, because if that was the case, then why were there 20 boxes that were still sitting around? And why would they have to be at Mar-a-Lago? I just don't understand the purpose of that, even aside from the fact that there have been instances where that premises has been deemed insecure, and at least one Chinese national was arrested for spying.
Very great insight there, as well as a lot of people wondering just why those documents would be, just really anywhere on property there associated with him there. But as we continue to bring the breaking news here to so many people, obviously this is going to be now really talked about in the media now. The 24-hour cycle could go a little bit longer than this one, especially going into the weekend there. It is going to be really analyzed and talked about. Okay, why was this certain document in there? Why was that? And how can now Donald Trump kind of try to pivot and try to put some focus maybe away from these investigations and this FBI rollout? What are your thoughts?
It's hard to understand the basis of how he can pivot on that without more information. But if so he really has one, and thank you for reading that live. It just shows you that sometimes history happens in real time. He had basically one point of law and one point of fact. One point of law is I declassified it. Again, the President of the United States does not have unfettered authority under federal law to declassify all information, especially if it is relative to nuclear documents. And if he did declassify it, but he'd have to demonstrate that. But as a matter of fact, for him to go in and say that this is something that was unjustified, it really further highlights more context of an explanation of what happened yesterday at the Justice Department here in Washington, because the more information that people get, they're going to be able to have a fuller context of understanding what's happening. I didn't see that response from the former president as really providing any new context, any additional information other than, frankly, what you predicted about 1 minute before it was released. So really the next step is going to be happening a bit behind closed doors, because under federal process and procedures, grand juries are supposed to operate in secret, and this is information that's going to be digested. But it may be quiet for the next few months because of the process and the policy in DOJ with respect to high-level political related announcements before an election. But I do think that the president going forward faces some distinct risks. Although the Presidential Records Act doesn't itself contain penalties, there are various provisions under federal law, including but not limited to felony punishment for mishandling of highly classified information, SCI compartmentalized information. It's one of the highest levels of classification under the system that's provided under the federal government. So I predict that there's going to continue to be very fast-moving developments. And although some of these developments are going to be happening behind closed doors, I would really keep a close eye on this space, because this is really the beginning. This is not the end of the issue.
Yeah, absolutely. This is just the beginning there, and you really felt it starting this week there, and we're already now getting some information coming from this warrant that was released. Now, let's also talk about why we believe maybe the FBI came in and wanted to do this. As far as, is there any thinking that maybe they thought, were these records going to be maybe destroyed, or did they think that there was some sort of tampering already going in place and they had to come in and take the evidence when they could?
Well, it seems that there are, at a high level, two reasons why they acted as steadily and as strongly as they did. The first is, of course, the fear and the concern as to the destruction of documents. And by the way, destruction of documents doesn't necessarily include someone walking in the middle of the night with a blowtorch and with malicious intent. Documents can be destructed, can go through a destruction process also through mishandling and negligence. So if a document which is highly classified is subject to risk of not being preserved, it can happen through intentional or unintentional means. So I think that there was certainly a risk in that regard. The other concern, secondly, was, of course, that if you had information that was of the highest levels of classification, then those sorts of pieces of information are supposed to be kept in areas that are called SCIFs. These are separate compartmentalized rooms that are frankly not even accessible by regular people like you and me. you have to have certain classification to even walk in the skip. So the very nature and the classification of the documents, as well as all the other circumstances and the inability to be able to make headway despite the requests and the meetings and the subpoena, were really part and parcel of the context of this unprecedented search and seizure.
Absolutely. Great insight as always as we continue to break here. The big story there with the warrant there released by the FBI. And now we're just getting some more insight there as well, as there will be a lot of talk and speculation about what could be happening next there. But you're saying that right now, after this moment, we might not hear any chatter for a while. Is that your thinking, Seth?
That's correct, because what happens is when the documents get brought in within the Justice Department, which teams internally with the FBI, turns these documents over to the AUSAs, the Assistant United States Attorneys. The AUSAs work with grand juries, and under the rules of the grand jury process, those operate in secret for the protection and preservation of information relative to cases that could lead to criminal charges. So I agree with you that we will have a period of quiet, but I also think that that will happen pretty quickly, because they're going to go through these boxes as we speak. And just because there's going to be a quiet, I think that that's going to really constitute more of the eye of the storm, and that within a couple of weeks, if not sooner, there's going to be more activity. So there's going to be more coming up right around the corner.
And my last question, Seth, here is we, for all viewers that are just joining us here on Live Now from Fox, we continue to break down the big news there of Fox News obtaining the FBI warrant there for the former President Donald Trump. But last question, Seth, that I wonder, do you think they might go a little bit faster, the DOJ, with possible charges if it does come to that? Because, well, there is the whole opportunity for Donald Trump to say that he wants to run for 2024, and if they do it after the fact from that, would it almost seem like now it is turning political, and that's the last thing that they want to be contrived from?
Well, I agree with you that the Justice Department, per its policies and practices, always tries to practically contort itself into a pretzel to try to avoid some kind of an appearance of political motivation. Now, of course, when you're dealing with this highly charged environment, good luck with that, because especially when you're dealing with this former president, he's not going to be bashful about trying to portray a political context or reaction. But the reality of this is that this is a fully staffed investigation where the resources of the United States Department of Justice are diving into this as we speak. And as someone who has worked across the table from the Justice Department, as someone who has litigated against the Justice Department and being familiar with their resources and having dealt with grand jury subpoenas and how these work, I do believe that they're going to move steadily on this, not only because of the proximity as it relates to timing for election, but as the Attorney General noted yesterday, this is a matter of extraordinary public concern. And it's going to be more important than ever for the Justice Department to make sure that they don't act in a slow, bureaucratic fashion, but they move on this expeditiously. There are virtually unlimited resources, and I can assure you that this is one of the hottest topics, and they will be moving with due speed. So I do believe that they're going to be operating pretty quickly, and buckle in, because I think there'll be more developments ahead.
I think that is a perfect way to end it. Buckle in, because who knows what is going to happen next. Seth Berenzweig, thank you so much for breaking it all down for us, giving us your insight, as well as the context around everything that we saw this week. It really was something in history that was playing out in real time, and then you just didn't know where it was going to go next. But it's so amazing to see. From Monday, we hear about the raid, and now Friday, today, it's almost like a bookend of now we're learning of what the documents taken there. It's quite extraordinary.
A week in history. The old saying is that, news is the first draft of history, and we're talking through it in real time. So indeed, a historic week here in Washington and for the nation as well.
Yes, absolutely. Seth, thanks again for joining us here on Live Now from Fox, and we will talk soon.